In this video, I'm going to walk you through the build of what I call my choice computer. And the reason why I say choice is I've chosen each one of these components for a specific reason. Not just because they were available or because of hype, because of the research that I've done. And based on that, I've created this choice of components for a specific goal. And the goal is a rendering computer with a small footprint that is quiet, and most of all, that is quick and powerful. All right, so what have I chosen? So before I go and do the build, I'm just going to go through the components. The first thing is the motherboard. This is the Gigabyte Designare EX. It's on the X399 platform, and it is obviously AMD. Right. The CPU, this is the Threadripper. It happens to be the 1920. I didn't go for the 1950. I don't think it's necessary for a high-end rendering computer for graphic editing, 4K editing. I think the 920 will do. The cooling for that CPU happens to be the Coolermaster 240, and one of the reasons why I chose this again is it is quiet. Well, it states it's quiet, and I will go and do the SPL levels with my SPL meter, but I can just see their noise level less than 15 dBA. So that's the cooling system. And then the power supply, this is the CX750M by Corsair. And then the RAM happens to be also Corsair Vengeance, and this is the DDR4, and it's 4 DIMMs, and it is 32 gigs at 3466 megahertz, but don't be fooled. Will I get that speed? We'll soon see. The graphics card happens to be the Radeon Pro WX5100. This is not a very well-known range, Radeon Pro, which is the upgrade on the Fire Pro, which I've had some good results on. Two reasons why I chose this card. The first one is this is geared for the multi-monitor setup, and myself, I use at least 4 monitors. I have also used 6 monitor setups. I have videos showing my desktop real estate with 6 monitors running concurrently. Now, another reason why I chose this is all the high-end AMD and NVIDIA cards happen to be out of stock. There's an international shortage because of the mining of cryptocurrency, and not just Bitcoin, also altcoins. The storage solution for the primary drive, the Windows drive, this is going to be a Windows computer. I've used the NVMe SSD 960 Pro M.2. This is Samsung. It's 512 gigs, and I specifically chose the Pro range because this is the best they've got, and also its read and write speeds are really competitive. I haven't seen much that can beat this under 10,000, well, in my country 10,000 Rand, but call it under $1,000. Okay, the secondary drive, in terms of being cost effective, I went just for the 960 EVO, not the Pro, because it is about 30 to 40% cheaper, and I don't think it's necessary to have to pay that extra. So that's why I've chosen the lower range of the Samsung. And then obviously you're going to need another hard drive. I've got some hard drives lying around, some 2 and 3 and 4 terabyte hard drives, just for storage when you do your rendering. Okay, and last but not least, the Corsair Carbide 400Q. Now this was very difficult to choose for the reason that I was looking for a small footprint box, but most important, quiet. And I was also looking at the 330 and the 600, and those are also the quiet range of Corsair. But I chose this one, and I hopefully have not made a mistake, and I will go through that, and I will also review this, and I will take a measurement on the noise levels after I've built this PC. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to now start building this monster. All right, speed up the video just to make it quicker. Right, so there's a few steps here when installing the Ryzen Threadripper. Now, the CPU, it's quite a large CPU. You can see the CPU holder there, and it's got 3 screws. Now you'll see me unscrew it right now shortly, and you've got to be aware that there's some actual steps that you've got to follow. Now you've got to unscrew these screws. It comes with that little screwdriver there, that thumb screw, and then you've got to slide out the placeholder. Now, do not touch those little fins. You can see where the CPU is going to go. Don't even attempt to brush them, or I know people wouldn't do this, but maybe you bump it and they really bend really quickly and easily. All right, so you're going to slide the new CPU in, and it comes with a holder, so it's like idiot proof, and you close the door, and now you've got to screw it in. Now you'll find that when you have to screw it in, you actually have to press fairly hard. So there is a numbering sequence. You'll see that there's a 1, 2, and 3, and you've got to follow that numbering sequence, similarly how you would do a gasket on a car, and you actually push pretty hard. So you just keep going around and you tighten them until the screw cannot go down anymore. All right. Once you've tightened that, now it's time to install the motherboard. Now remember that each case has different layouts for a motherboard. So this happens to be a full-size ATX, and that is the biggest. I think that this box, the 400Q, can take an extend. I'm not sure. I'll have to check that. But now what I'm doing here is, if you see, I'm pointing to a additional spacer pin that needs to be installed. Otherwise, the motherboard isn't in properly. So what I did is I had to install an additional screw spacer, and I've done that. Now I'm just screwing in all the screws to fasten the motherboard in. This box is the 400Q, which is made by Corsair. I specifically chose it because it's advertised as quiet. You will see later in the video I did take some Spl measurements, and now we're just finishing screwing it in. Now just go through it just to check that all the screws were done and that they were done tightly. Now inserting the RAM, one's got to be aware that you can't just insert it any way you want, ad hoc. There are specific pairing slots. For example, you got to look into the manual and you got to see, like, slot 1 probably goes with slot 3. And 2 goes with slot 4. So that's why if I'm installing 4 DIMMs of RAM, you can see I install one, miss one, install one, miss one, and you'll actually find that the RAMs have to be flipped on the other side. So this is how you install 4 of the, this happens to be the Corsair Vengeance RAM. Right, so I'm putting the power supply in. The best way to do it is just angle it like that, pull the wires at the back and shift it in like so. Now we're just going to screw it in. Right, so once you've installed the power supply, you'll see you'll have a wad of power cables. You can see all these black cables here. Now, the way I do it is I generally install everything at once, even though there will be some spares. For example, there are many extra SATA cables, but I just install them. And the reason is if I want to expand in the future, I'm not going to go look around for this additional SATA cable. It will be there, and I'll just wrap it up if I don't use it. And also, once you've installed the cover, for example, this happens to be the 400Q, you can see it comes with that cover. I don't want to be dismantling my PC in order just to install an additional SATA drive, for example. So I just install all the cables, and the ones I don't use, I'll just wrap up. And you'll see on the final build what I mean by just wrapping them up. All I do is I coil them and tie them down with some cable ties. So you install the power supply. You want to make it quite neat. Now this 400Q, it does come with this plastic cover, which you'll see in a moment. And that plastic cover, I'm sure it just gives a little bit, maybe half a decibel of additional sound dampening. And what you need to do with that plastic cover is you have to tighten it on the back. So that is why I had to flip the box in order to tighten that plastic cover. Now you can see all the power cables coming through that slot. And now I'm going to install the NVMe drives. Be careful when you install the NVMe drives, slot them in slowly. I do have a video on installing NVMe drives. You're welcome to watch it. But the most important thing is you need to know is that the NVMe drives come in different sizes. You get different size NVMe drives. You can see on the top left of the motherboard, there's a shorter slot, and then there where the PCIe cards are, well, slots would be, they're slightly the longer NVMe. Now the NVMe drive might need a post. Well, what I mean by a post is it's in a spacer that has to be put there. Now that one did have the spacer. As you can see, it's not the full size card, it's an intermediary size. And it's very important that when you do put the heatsink over the card, and I highly recommend a motherboard that comes with a heatsink, the heatsink must offer isolation. What I mean by isolation is at the back of the heatsink there, I've just pointed to it and I do have a video on it. It's got a little rubberizing anti-conductivity little pad, and that allows the heat to transfer into the heatsink, but also not allowing any electrical charge to actually be touching the cover, the heatsink cover. So it must be isolated. Don't just stick a piece of metal on top of an NVMe drive. That's the point of what I'm telling you. All right, now I'm installing the graphics card. This happens to be the WX5100. It's a very small card for what it can do in terms of its specs. You can see it's very short in terms of the height. It's the full size height, but you'll see now when I install it, what I'm trying to work out is I don't want to have a hotspot in the motherboard area. So I don't want to install it where I'll get like a see what I'm doing, I'm trying to work out. You see the RAM's going to create heat and the NVMe is going to create heat. So I want to install the card where I don't get a heat trap. I want the air to be able to move through without there being a hotspot in the motherboard. That's why I've spaced the graphics card a little bit away from the RAM and definitely away from the NVMe, so that there won't be any hotspots in the vicinity of the graphics card. The graphics card really does create a lot of heat when you are doing your rendering. You can have some rapid temperature increases. I did take a measurement. I do have a video on the performance of that WX5100. You can have a look, and I did use a infrared thermal gun just to take measurements, and the measurements were, it goes from like 35 degrees to 55 degrees within about 3 minutes of when you are rendering. So it does increase temperature pretty rapidly. Okay, now then you just got to connect up all the front panel, you know, your audio, your reset button, your hard drive lights. Now what's nice about the Gigabyte, it does come with a header, and that header allows you to plug each one of those. I had to take the graphics card out to give me some more space, but it does give you extra space, extra header where you can actually do it in your hand. You can put the different connections in. There you can see I'm doing it, the hard drive light, the power button, the reset button, and you just put it into the plastic header holder, and then you plug the entire header into the motherboard. So you don't have to try and squeeze your fingers into the corner and trying to read the little, there's the header, and trying to read the little signage on the board. So you just need to plug that in, and then the USB 3, which is also on the front of the chassis or the front of the box. So you just plug in all the headers, and then you are now good to go. This Gigabyte board does give you 2 USB 3s and I think it's 2 USB 2s on board, additional. Not the ones at the back on the faceplate, but on board. So if you've got USB ports on your case, well, you can plug them with the header straight into the motherboard. And as I said, you get quite a few extra USB ports there. Right, so now I'm going to show you how to do the cooling. I did have the Master Liquid cooler, but as you'll see, I'm going to give you a lot of detail about what the challenge with the Master Liquid was. It didn't come with the bracket, but I believe the new ones do. It says it's compatible with various CPUs, but guess what? Unless you're buying it now, I believe the brand new ones come with the additional adapter. But if you're not buying it right now, you'll find that it's not compatible as is, meaning that it needs an extra step or an extra bracket. Even if you look in the booklet, you can see all the different types of chipsets except the TR4, because you need something called this. This is the AMD Socket TR4 mounting kit for the Master Liquid series. That's what it looks like. If you want to know the part number, it is RLTR4B MLLS R1. Now, what it consists of are these two plates. Now, what these plates do is the one goes there and the other one goes there. But before you do this step, you must first mount it onto your heatsink area of your cooling solution. So I'm going to mount that. It doesn't, the little kit does not come with the screws, so you might have to go and fish out your little screws that came in with the little kit bags that came in the little kit bags. So in there you should be able to find some screws. Now you'll have to decide which way this is going to go, and unfortunately you are a bit limited because this is narrow, so that means it has to be in this direction, and that is according to their manual. I suppose you could force it. The reason why I wouldn't recommend it, you can see the clearance is a bit small. I'm not saying it won't work, I'm just saying that they recommend the wider side actually be there. So just for your reference, I'm going to do what the manual recommends. So that's the way, and then these plates go on top just like that. See these two little lips here? Well, the plate goes on top of the little lips, and this one will go on this side over here. And then you'll need your little screws. Now it didn't come with the screws as I stated. So the screws that we're going to use look like this, and what you'll find is that the little kit, this little aluminium fitting is threaded. It's got actual threads in there. The screw has to come from the bottom because the thread is only on the plate. So you're kind of fastening the plate to the housing of the heatsink by going through the bottom. There we go. Done. And now the other one. Okay, it's not aligned nicely. Okay, my advice is don't tighten until both are in, so it can just move around a bit. Okay, now I'm going to tighten it. Okay, done. Now the other side. Now, this is obvious, but if you do it like that, then you probably weren't concentrating, because obviously this one has to go towards the CPU, so please just do it the right way. Okay, now we're going to screw it in. Now you want to put your silicone grease. Now my advice is make sure this is completely free of any sediment. Now I've put the silicone paste there. I'm assuming you're retrofitting, like you're taking it out of an old machine and you're putting it in a new machine. So maybe you don't have any silicone paste. So you can just use electrical, for transistors. I've used this several times. This is silicone paste. This is the white one, and you just peel it on. I know that is the computer range one, but since this is made for high quality transistors, it also will work. So you're going to peel this off. In your case, it's probably already been peeled off because you've already installed it. And now you're just going to align this. Okay, now hold it in place. We don't want to smear out all that silicone. Okay, now the tightening. We start here, number one, and we get into the screw, and just enough. I'm not too tight. Now we go to the opposite side, which is number two, which is kind of how you would work with a gasket when you're on a car. So that's number two, and just a little bit. Don't go crazy. You see, what's happening now is the silicone must smear out. And now we go to number three. Okay, there we go, 3 is in, and now we go to number 4. Then wait a few seconds. What happens is the silicone must slowly be squeezed out, if you will, and it actually will allow you to go back to number 1 and do about 2 turns. Okay, that was 3 turns. Now you go opposite. Now you'll be able to do 3 turns. Now you'll go opposite. Right, now you'll go back to number 1. Sorry. And then you'll go back. And you'll go there. It's like you're doing a gasket. You get a nice even seal. Right, now you'll go back to number 1. And then back to 2. And you can see that it is now at full tightness. So I'm just going to use my screwdriver just to make sure that is full tightness. It can't go anymore. And this one here, full. That's done. Right, so now you just want to clean up, do all the last minute wiring. You'll see that the fan headers, well, I connected the fan headers on the master liquid straight to the motherboard, and you've got plenty of options, as I said. Now it's just cleaning up the wiring, final checks, just making sure the wiring is not in the way of the fans. Cable ties really help. If you do use insulation tape, I recommend Nitto type. You can see it on the table there. It lasts really long and it doesn't lose its stickiness that easily. Alright, so that's what it looks like. I'm now just making sure I don't want any wires in the way of the fan, because there's no point in having the fan obstructed by additional wiring. So you also don't want over time, if the box moves or gets you know, if it's on a table or gets carried around, you don't want wires to get stuck in the fan. Okay, so going to show you the final internals now. There we go. So the master liquid cooler had to be installed on the side, because if I install it on the top, then I have to have the dust cover open, and I don't want that cover open, so I have to install it on the side, and it's fine. And I also had to forgo one of the case fans that came with the case, because obviously I had to put the radiator there. But then don't forget that now I gain 2 fans in terms of the master liquid, which has got the 2 fans. Right. I'm now going to wrap up the additional wiring which I don't need. Remember, I said that I prefer to actually have the wiring available to me if I need to upgrade, but since I'm not using it now, I just wrap up. These are all the additional wiring which I'm just wrapping up. And now I just put the dust covers back on and the actual cover for the case. Okay, in this part of the video I'm going to just do 3 things, and that is just discuss the front little faceplate here. I'm going to do a sound pressure level measurement, and I'm also going to show you how this little switch here controls the fan speeds. Okay, first things first, just going back to this front panel. Why I like this box is the USBs face upwards and the power button is there and the reset is here. So what that means to me is that excuse me, is it's quite easy to, you know, if the box is on your side, you can quite easily just press the power button or insert a USB or charge your phone or whatever it may be that you want to do. And you can easily get access to this. Why I don't like these things on the front is it gets bumped. If there's a USB stick coming out, for example, you see that, it's quite, you know, if it's sitting like that, it's quite easy if someone walks past or your chair knocks it, you'll literally break the USB stick in there. Okay, the next thing is this does have this 3-position fan speed controller. So what it means is that you've got 1, 2, and 3. Now I'm going to turn on the box to take some SPL measurements, and at the same time we're going to measure the different noise values with this fan. So I'm going to just start with what the sound, the ambient sound is. So I'm going to stop talking and let's just get a reference measure. Okay, so you can see that the background noise is 30 and less, so it's fairly quiet here. And now I'm going to switch on the computer and let's see what the SPL level goes to. But keep in mind that just to describe the build, I have changed one of the system fans for the Master Liquid Cooler, which has got two 240 radiators. So that's a little bit different, or are they 140? I can't recall. I'll check in the box. But anyway, so let's put the fan on number 1 and let's switch it on. Okay, so we're getting to about 37 decibels. The fan is on the lowest. Now, what I'm going to do now, look, technically this should be 1 meter away from the noise source, but I'm just going to put it quite close for the sake of this video. But as I say, I mean, unless your face is going to be sitting here right next to the box, maybe the box is going to be on your table, but usually you take the measurement 1 meter away. Okay, now let me increase the fan speed. Now keep in mind it is only one fan that is connected to this fan controller, because as I said, I did use the Master Liquid Cooler, so I had to remove the system fan. Now this little switch here allows you to control at least 3 fans. The box comes with 2, but you could put a 3rd fan onto this controller. So now let's take the reference measurement and then I'm going to increase the fan speed. So you can see with the fan on number 3, it is quite a lot louder. We gained at least 4 decibels there. And for those of you who know about acoustics, a 4 dB gain is fairly significant in terms of noise. But in terms of actually noise levels, we're still well under 50 dBs. I would not consider this a noisy box. In fact, my review is that this is actually really good. I feel like the Q is keeping up to the name, the 400Q, but also keep in mind that I really did shop around for noiseless components. I specifically got a quiet power supply. I specifically got the graphics card with only a single fan. Alright, so let's look inside and just have a look at how the fan controller is actually going to work. Right, to control the fan speed, you'll have to plug in, this happens to be a SATA power cable connector, so that means that your fans will be fed from a SATA. You'll need an additional SATA available lead from your power supply. So there's a SATA male to SATA female, and then what will happen is when you've got that plugged in, it'll provide power to these 4. Now I only have 3 here because I'm using one, and you will see shortly what I mean by that. And what happens is these get plugged into your additional fans, and then when you control the adjusting the toggle switch, you'll actually control the speed. So there are the 3 plus 1. One is on the other side, and the little powers connector there. As you can see there, I've got a system fan, so that one is wired to the button on the front plate. Now let me just see if I can get them both in view. Right, now it's at full power. Now look what happens when I reduce it. I've now taken it down to 1, and the fan speed obviously goes down. So that's a nice feature, so I do use it, but unfortunately I needed some serious cooling for this Threadripper CPU, so I had to go for liquid cooling, and the only place that was viable to install it happens to be here on the front. And it's not a great install. It's well, it's fine, but the point I'm trying to make is that the switch on the top here is only letting me control that fan. I need the CPU control temperature to control the what do you call it, the liquid cooling. Although you could wire it in such a way that the toggle switch on the top could also control the liquid cooling. So you could do that. That's totally up to you. And the point is, you've got 4 little plugs there, so you can have even another fan somewhere, although I don't know where you would put it. All right, so overall, my comments on this box is I'm quite happy I got it. Keep in mind, there is no DVD or CD writer bay. You would have to have an external writer if you wanted to get this box. Right, so this is my desktop setup. As you can see, I'm busy doing the editing for this actual video. And what you're looking at is 4 27 HD monitors. The one in the top right over there is actually a 4K. So it's actually 3 HD and 1 4K. They all happen to be Dell monitors. Right, so in this case, there are the 4 display port, and I have 2 converters here to DVI. And the reason why I have 2 is I didn't have a long enough cable. But the point is that if you don't have an display port monitor, these passive converters are very reliable and they do work well. So it's totally not a problem for long-term use if you are using the passive converters. However, I'll give you one piece of advice. Don't use bad cables. If the cables are not high quality, you're going to have a problem. I've just changed this HDMI cable because one of the monitors wouldn't come on, and literally it was the cable. Swap cables and it worked immediately. So this is the only problem, is you can see these additional interfaces here. This goes into that, into an adapter, which is not ideal, but I'm just saying that use high quality stuff and adapters. Right, okay, so here are the 4 connectors, and as I said, you can use a hub to get that 5th monitor or 6th if you need. Right, looking inside, here's the card. It does run quite warm. It's not pumping now, but I did measure it the other day, and if you just look at this is an infrared temperature gauge. You can see it's about 44 degrees. I had it got to 55 degrees when I was actually rendering and when I was actually pumping the card. Look, the question is this fan sufficient? Look, the card is never switched off because of heavy use as yet. I haven't measured it with the 6 monitors, but I mean, unless you're going to be running 5 monitors all streaming their own HD or 4K movies, then I don't anticipate you're going to run into a problem. Now this fan, this little fan on the inside there, is actually very quiet. You can't hear it once the case is closed. And I've got the system fans here, and I'm just going to lower the system fans, and I'm just going to show you the Spl measurement here, because this is a sound pressure level meter, and obviously as I'm talking the sound is going up. So I'm just going to put it here and then I'm going to stop talking. Now, when you use an Spl meter, you need to be 1 meter away. Now, obviously, this is right on top, and I mean, you're not going to be, your face isn't going to be here while the computer's on. But if the computer's on your desk, this is an idea of what it'll be like, especially if the case is open. A lot of people keep their cases open for some reason. So you're looking at less than 43 decibels. Now, I can tell you from my own observation right here, what you're hearing is this fan at the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually stop this fan at the back here, because although the sensor, the microphone is here by the card, I can actually hear it's this fan that's actually making most of the noise. No, I'm not doing that part. Right, so it's less than 43 dBs. Now, it's quite difficult to know exactly where that is coming from, because I have a fan there, there's 2 fans here, and there, don't forget the power supply. So unless you switch them all off, then you wouldn't be able to get an accurate measurement. But the point is that the card is no louder than the other components. Now let's put the cover on. You can see with the cover on, it's less than 40 dB. So there's nothing wrong with that. Now, a point that I'd like to make is that when you are actually rendering or using your computer under heavy use, what you will hear is the cooling system rather than the graphics system. So the graphics fan will just spin a bit faster, but you'll start to hear the system fans increasing their RPM. So you won't, the point again is that even under heavy usage, it's not the graphics card you're going to hear, you'll hear these other component cooling systems in your box. Just to close off, I'd like to show you some real life experience on this card. I've got Sony Vegas running here. I'm going to render. This is a 4K high bit rate little video here. And I've got the task manager open so that you can view. Now, keep in mind that I do have OBS running, which is quite hungry at the moment. As you can see, it is locking up quite a lot of the GPU engine. And Sony Vegas is not running as yet. So let's quickly now get the rendering to start. And that's going to render now. Now let's have a look at the graphics utilization. You can see there immediately the Sony Vegas is popping in its head there, requiring a lot of the GPU. Okay. Now, let's have a look at the other features, like can we do other things while it is locking, well, I wouldn't call it locking up, but while it is requesting so much GPU. So let's now look at a YouTube or maybe a Blu-ray. Here I have a Blu-ray on a NAS and it's called Maudi and it's a 15 gig file. So you can see that I'm now going to get that started. I'm just going to go a little bit into the video. I'm just going to lower the volume. Right, and let's have a look at the GPU now. You see now Media Player Home Cinema, which is the software which I'm using here, is asking for just under, well, between 8 and 12. You can see there it's going. The Vegas is still going strong there. And then you can see that it's quite seamless. There's no jitter. There's no problems. Now, what about watching a YouTube video? Okay, so let's launch YouTube and maybe get Firefox to use some of the GPU as well. Okay, so I'm just going to get that going, and now we've got another video, and let's have a look at the utilization. Firefox, yeah, it's not much because it's not very high a bit rate, that video. And just in terms of the stability, you can see that the graphics engine is running fine. I can show you, for example, even another Blu-ray playing. I did do the little test. I'm not hearing the graphics card at all while this is happening, even though it's at 45%. Now look, the CPU is pumping because of Vegas. Vegas is really putting the CPU through the paces, and there you can see the video. And in terms of just using the computer, like let's launch Excel and maybe let's launch Word document. They are launching, but the problem is you're not seeing them because they're launching on other screens. Maybe let's just open an account. Okay, there we go. So it is getting it from the OneDrive. Okay, so you can see the graphics are operating fine. The computer's still stable. Okay, keep in mind I use the OneDrive, so the slow closing and opening is actually because there you can see it is synchronizing to OneDrive, so that's not an example of the graphics. I'm just thinking what other software we could use just to launch and just have a look at. And the system, it is responsive. There's no problem. I'm not having any challenges, let's put it that way. Okay, so that just brings me to the end of this video. I just wanted to show you some real life usage. You can see there's lots of things happening on this computer, and the GPU is running stable, and there you can see the memory and the GPU. There we go, if you wanted to have a look at that. So looking at the build, it was the AMD Threadripper. I recommend the 1920. It's the one I used. Obviously, if you've got more cash, get the best one. But price versus performance, I felt that the 1920 was the best option. Then the RAM, I'm using the Corsair 3466 MHz DDR4. Now, just be careful with the RAM because The platform, the AMD platform, obviously is not new, but the 399 chip with the Threadripper, you know, extensive testing has to be done, and that's why I always recommend going to the motherboard manufacturer and actually having a look at the recommended RAM. For example, if you go to Gigabyte's website, you'll see the X399, for example, or maybe you got the Aorus, or maybe you got an Asus board. But I'm just giving you advice here, and you'll see that says their memory support list. Now, what you should do, also the M.2, is go and have a look at what they've actually tested and see what frequency they managed to clock the RAM at. Now, the RAM that I recommended for this build was the DDR4 3466, and if you actually have a look here, you will see that I made sure that that particular module, the part number, was tested by Gigabyte and that they actually got that frequency. For example, if you go and buy this RAM, you'll see that Gigabyte only actually got that megahertz out of that chip. Now, I'm not saying you can't get the Foster option. I'm not saying that you won't be able to tweak it in a way that will give you these maximum frequency. I'm just saying that I would go with the manufacturer on these core components. And when it comes to the RAM, I just chose what the manufacturer has tried and reached stability on, and that is how I chose that RAM. So what you'll do is you'll copy and paste that part number, and there you'll see the actual part number for Corsair, whatever it is. I'm not promoting Corsair, I'm just saying that that is how you cross-reference the RAM. Now, getting back to the build, I then went for the Gigabyte Designare EX399 for various reasons. I'm not sure if I said it, but if you are wanting to know why I went for it, I do have a video on the Designare EX399, and I do discuss why I went for that motherboard. Right, now the storage, again, good idea to check the compatibility of the NVMe drive and whether you will get that frequency or that read and write speed. Now, I use the 960 Pro and I also use the straight 960. And how did I know to use that? Well, I actually made sure that this particular motherboard was compatible with the 960. So I checked it, and there we go. You compare the part numbers. So they've got the 1 terabyte, the 5112. There's the Pro being tested. You can see they write the part numbers here, and there's lots to choose from. Obviously, I'm not promoting Samsung. I'm just telling you the ones I used. The difference in the Pro and the standard is the Pro does come with a longer warranty, and the read and write speed is slightly faster. Okay, the graphics card I have explained in the video. It's a WX5100. The Master Liquid Cooling, I've also gone into a lot of detail. I use a Corsair 750 watt power supply. If you're not sure how much power on your power supply you'll need, you can easily go and, I think it is Coolermaster, have a power supply calculator, and it actually what you do is you will list all the items, and it'll actually give you a recommended. Sorry, my internet is really slow. It'll actually give you a recommended power supply in terms of watts it'll give you, and you'll select all the things that you've chosen. How many PCI cards, the CPU speed, are you overclocking, so forth. Now, if you're wondering why I chose 750 watts, well, the recommended power I needed was only 550 watts, but I went higher because I might in the future run 2 of the Radeon Pro cards in tandem. It's called I think Crossfire, and there must be matched cards, so that's what I'm going to do. And then the box, as I said, it's the Corsair 400Q, which is the option I went for.